Wow, I'm learning a little bit about YouTube. I put out a short where I was talking about millennials and how they had some issues, and wow, got a lot of clicks. And it was something I was making fun of this guy on home gardening. So, fair being fair, while I did put out a long video that was talking about the whole millennial thing, let me dive deep into this entire gardening subject and why it even hit me that, hey, I'm going to make fun of someone. So, to start at the beginning, the University of Michigan put out a study about gardening. And home gardening is what the videos talk about, though it actually was about urban gardening. And I'm going to start with I actually have taken the time to read the study front to back. I am not a fan of this study. There's a fair amount wrong with it. I'm not going to dwell on it all here, but it seemed more like an undergrad student. It certainly didn't seem like something that I should pay a lot of attention to because there's a lot of holes in it. Having said that, uh, there was a ton of reaction online. This guy who goes on this rant, and why did I make fun of him? Well, look at the screenshot. Either that's clickbait or he's sincerely upset, and maybe it's a little of both. So he goes on to talk about the hey, how can you talk about this being more carbon intensive? He has a garden, he has every right. Well, I don't really get what his argument is. Everything we do creates carbon emissions. This study was making an attempt to see, for reasons not entirely clear to me, whether or not gardening versus home agricultural had more benefit emission wise. I'm not surprised by the result that the food you buy at a supermarket has fewer emissions than the stuff I buy when I plant my garden in the back. And I have a garden in the back, and I like my garden in the back. And we recently got some hydroponic stuff. I like that food. Not under any delusion that I'm doing the environment a favor. I like the fresh food. There are good reasons to do it, but I also know it's costing me a lot more to do this gardening when you add in the costs of the equipment, some railroad ties, buying the soil to put it in, all that stuff. I know what it costs at the supermarket for a head of lettuce. I know what it cost me to create a few head of lettuce. The head of lettuce I made was a lot better tasting, but it was more expensive. And in our society, expense typically equates to efficiency. And since energy is required to make the product, if something costs less, there's a fair chance that it was done in a somewhat more efficient way. Now, that's not always the case. And so, doing a study like this, there's nothing wrong with that. Where I take issue with everyone getting so freaking upset about this study is it's not a big deal either way. There is an issue with agriculture. Agriculture is responsible for a lot of emissions. Are vegetables the issue? Well, they make up 20% of a person's diet, best case. And it's fairly well established that beef is a more carbon issue and that we should probably avoid beef. Well, I love a steak. I'm also overweight and I should probably avoid beef. That doesn't mean I don't have a hamburger from time to time, but I'm not kidding myself that it's part of a healthy diet. And I'm not kidding myself that I'm doing the world any favors by having it. So, the study also spends a lot of time talking about the social values of a garden. And I think that, to start with, is where a lot of climate scientists and people who do these sort of studies get themselves in trouble. Do the science work, present it in terms of context of how it relates to the overall problem, which is totally not done in this study, and skip mention of gentrification in your study because that's not what the study should be about. All right, gentrification is a different issue. That's not got very little to do with carbon emissions. Please stop. So when you do that, you create these rants about someone trying to take away his garden, which no one is trying to take away your garden. Let's get that square. Um, and it also then goes into the data quality issue. Um, I was really disappointed when I took a deeper dive into this paper. I said, okay, I'm not going to just read the paper. I'm going to try to learn more about carbon footprints of food. And there is a lot of tilting of the data towards a person's particular agenda and it's aggravating. Um, Rice on a page that I was looking at that was heavily vegan was being portrayed as a very carbon friendly food to eat. However, I am fairly cognizant of the fact that if you look at methane emissions, rice, in terms of overall methane emissions, is right up there with beef. So I'm like, what the heck's going on here? And then I dived a little further into it, and for those who've seen my other videos, this point is really important. How comparing CO2 to methane is done as a convenience by scientists, but it also overly simplifies and understates the near term impact of methane. When you see someone say methane is 20 times as potent as carbon dioxide, or they say 80 times as potent as carbon dioxide, or they say 200 times, or maybe they say it's 10 times, it all has to do with the time frame you're measuring it over. And this is an important difference that's getting lost. I know I didn't get it at first. So a lot of studies will say something in the 20s. Well, it's 20 times more potent a gas than carbon dioxide for creating global warming if you're measuring it over a 100-year time span. But if you're worried about the next 20 years, and everyone's talking about what's going to happen in the next 20 years, it's 80 times more potent. And with methane levels going up dramatically, faster than carbon dioxide, it's really kind of gotten lost in the discussion what a big deal it is. Frankly, from researching this paper on food, I understand a lot better now the whole discussion about liquefied natural gas than I did just a week ago. And the devil's in the details. So don't freak out when you see a sub study. Don't be surprised that the media is going for clicks because the person going for clicks creates a video that's also going for clicks. Heaven knows I'm even guilty of it. I found out saying millennials in your title is a really good way to get people to pay attention. Imagine that. So you get the old okay boomer thing. So take a deep breath. What you do does create emissions. It's a question of how you're going to spend your money. And to this end, I also would add what this study, it lacks the economic framework it needs. Because in discussing this whole matter of going to the supermarket versus growing it in your home garden, there's also this thing called an opportunity cost at work here. So if I save $100 because I'm shopping at the supermarket rather than doing a home garden, there is the question then of what I do with that $100. So if I put it in the bank and do nothing with it, save it for my children's education in the future, I could make an argument then that, in fact, by avoiding home gardening, that's a good thing. But that may not be what I do with it, right? I could go shopping at Goodwill because I need a new pair of shoes while I'm reusing. That's not such a bad way to do it. Or I might go to a department store and buy something brand new that I'm not going to wear all that frequently. big difference in what I'm doing for the environment. In the latter, it's probably a bad thing. Same thing as, hey, if I go out and go to the beach and spend a day jet skiing, right? Rent a jet ski. Is that a good thing to do? Well, probably not. If I go out to eat dinner, well, that actually can cut both ways. Um, but if I know for sure that if I eat lobster that's been flown in fresh from Maine, that's probably a bad thing. So there are these decisions we make every day. They all have impacts. And I don't think we need a study to go too deep into the question of vegetables. We need to provide the context of how the vegetable plays into what we do. In your home, the appliances that are the big issue are your dishwasher and your air conditioner and your dryer. And anything you can do to cut down on those is a good thing. So you can play around with your iPad and when you charge it, and that's good, but those are the devices that are the number one problem. Yeah, there's good, maybe setting a good example, but they're not the issue. So please, anytime you see the media talking about a study, take a breath. If you see someone going on a rant about a study, as I mentioned in one of my other videos, I strongly suspect that this guy understands that he does other things in his life that have issues with emissions. Maybe he has some really fuel inefficient truck and he doesn't want anyone to take his truck away from him. Well, okay, but it is generating emissions. Sorry about your bad luck. And the whole comment, he's like, well, you can come to my channel no matter what, that there could be 2 or more sides to climate science. No, there's not. All right. It's kind of, for example, Newton's law of gravity. If I drop a bowling ball and an orange from a ladder, they're going to hit the ground at the same time. That's how it's going to work. Now, the question you might say is, if I'm talking about the climate, there is no doubt that emissions are causing warming. The question is am I going to get hit in the head with an orange, which I'm not going to like, but it's not going to kill me, or is it going to be the bowling ball? All right. I can tell you what it's not going to be: the feather. So that's what we're talking about today. Understand that all expenditures generate some level of carbon, because I'm going to be taking it from here and going into it a discussion of when it actually does matter in future videos. So hope you all take care, and I'll talk to you later.